Well, another Fort Hood shooting and another soldier that did the shooting. The one thing I want to emphasize here, though, is psychiatric meds and the people that are actually administering them, which are supposedly professionals that are trained and all this type of stuff. And I just want to point out that actually it's a pseudoscience psychiatry, and these people actually are far more damaging to the population as a whole. You know, there's certain instances where the drugs actually do some good, but by and large, it's a very profitable business, and there is no empirical scientific testing. It's all subjective as to exactly what the diagnosis is for a person. In other words, a person could go to like 10 different psychiatrists, and if you don't tell the other psychiatrist what the diagnosis is ahead of time, they will come up with all different types of diagnoses and different types of medicines for prescriptions. So nothing is really based upon empirical scientific hard evidence of, like, say, a measured chemical imbalance in the brain or something like that that can be shown, like, like, say, for instance, other medicines are like your blood pressure is too high, your blood sugar is too high, or your cholesterol level is too high. I'm not agreeing or disagreeing with this as a solution being medicines, but what I'm saying is at least there's an empirical scientific measurement that is done to say, okay, your cholesterol level is this, and they want it to have it at this. I'm not saying that that's a bona fide good assumption in itself, but at least they're using a measured science. In the case of psychiatry, it's all subjective. And, maybe they have a little bit of codes and things to go by, but if you actually look at the codes that they go by for prescriptions, there are so many categories that are unspecified. Unspecified. They actually say it'll have a diagnostic code, and it'll have a number next to it. And see, this number in this diagnostic code actually makes it seem like it's scientific, but psychiatry is not scientific. And, the actual proof of it is the lack of empirical measurements. And also, how you can code is like 10 different psychiatrists, and if they don't know what the other ones are doing, they'll come up with 10 different answers, 10 different medicines, and all this type of stuff. And they usually will come up with medicines no matter what, because it's in their financial interest to do so. Even if they work for the government, because it makes it look like they have this many more people that they're prescribing, they're treating, they're helping, and all this kind of crap, because it makes it look like they're doing more. In other words, if everybody that went to the psychiatrist who was even government employed and he didn't give out any meds, they would fire him, right? Because he was not necessary. He was not necessary. So no matter what, there's always a financial interest for them to prescribe meds, even if they work for the government. But, the alternative media is saying that the shooter in Fort Hood was on medicines. The major media, I've read articles where they said they're not sure if he was on medicines. Now, I think, my personal opinion, probably was, but you really don't know. But the thing is, historically, most of these mass shootings, the shooter has been involved with the psychiatric profession and has been on meds. Almost all these freaking mass shootings that occurred in all the years back have involved psychiatric medicines. Now, you can maybe argue that it's possible that, this was the reason they did the shooting because, well, they needed the medicines, and, it's like they were psychiatric, they had an imbalance in their brain or some kind of chemical imbalance or whatever it is that made them aggressive and want to harm other people, or whatever it was. But on the other hand, I don't think a lot of these drugs are not tested. Actually, one of the drugs out there that's still used today, I'll give you a highlight of it, is Haldol. Haldol. Actually, that was used on Soviet prisoners or dissidents. And it's still administered in a psychiatric profession today, even though most people would say this drug is harmful to them. They even had to have it. And what it is like a lobotomy of the brain by using chemicals. and it can actually cause permanent damage. But they administer that in the United States quite frequently, and it was the common drug of choice in the Soviet Union, used against dissidents who did not think correctly, as far as being, they were against the state, they were against the oligarchy, they were against, the robber barons of Russia or whatever the hell it was, and so they went to the re-education camps, and that was a popular drug that was used against them. And it was even brought out that by the people that were in the administering the drugs, that it was used unfairly against the dissidents and the people in Russia. But it's used in the United States, so there's a commonality here. But I should actually point something out, another angle, because karma is a bitch sometimes. And with these psychiatrists, in a way, if these people if it comes out where it shows that these people committed, or any of these people in the past or present, or this recent event in Fort Hood, in recent shooting in Fort Hood, or any of the ones in the past, can show a link between the medicines they were given and why they, which caused them to do the mass shootings, the psychiatrist should be put on the line legally. And wouldn't karma be a real bitch for them? Because, right now, in my opinion, these psychiatrists are like highly, highly paid drug dealers. If somebody was going around selling weed to people or something like that, which is probably more likely to be a drug to calm people down and cause them to be less violent, the cops would, enforce the law against them in a heartbeat, and throw the book at them, right? But in the case of a psychiatrist, their average salary is probably $300,000 to $500,000 a year to get rewarded highly financially. Plus, they also are, for the most part, respected in the community. Not by me, that is, but I personally can't stand them. But wouldn't it be nice if we could actually turn the law against these people? Because in reality, the reality of it is, the psychiatrists are far worse than most of the illegal drug dealers in this country. The psychiatrists are. They administer drugs that are far more harmful, and it is my opinion, because in any case, for instance, all these shootings pretty much that happened over this recent event in Fort Hood, plus all the prior shootings, almost all these people were under the care of a psychiatrist or on some type of psychiatric meds, which proves either the meds caused the problem, which is what I suspect, or the psychiatrist did not know what the hell they were doing, and they were not prescribing the right type of meds, or they were using antiquated meds such as I highlighted, I think it's called Haldol, which was used by like the Soviet Union against dissidents, and that causes people, not to think clearly or be rational, because basically it's like a lobotomy. It freaking separates one part of the brain from the other and causes them to be totally irrational. So, you don't know. It's my suspicion, highly suspect, though, that in many cases these shootings would have never ever happened over the years if it was not for the administering of psychiatric drugs by these charlatans that go behind a set of codes to make it look like they diagnose somebody scientifically with empirical evidence that they have this chemical imbalance in their brain and they're trying to treat it. And the truth is, it's all subjective. It's all subjective. It's all guesswork. And the drugs they administer these people are actually causing them to be far more irrational, and in many cases far more violent than if they never had the drugs in the first place. Common sense goes a long way, because actually this has been the observation of many people, and it's time that the law be focused on the root cause of many of these problems. And it's basically this post-traumatic stress syndrome or something like that. A lot of times it is the drugs themselves. Because even like I said, in today, a commonly prescribed drug, maybe it's not super common, but it's still not very uncommon, is like, say for instance, like Haldol or Thorazine or something, I think is an equivalent, that could cause a person to be extremely irrational, extremely violent, or lethargic, or whatever. They can go in one direction or the other. And that was the drug of choice that was given by the Soviet Union to dissidents. And they will give that drug out here today in the United States. You know, I put out a video recently about a former Marine who basically was roasted to death in a jail cell for being a vagrant who was homeless. I think he was sleeping in a park or on private property or something like that, and they hauled him away, and they put him in this cell, and the cell was so hot that if there was a little window in it, if you opened up this little window, he might have survived, but he did not. But I suspect they gave him drugs when they put him in there to calm him down or put him to sleep or some bullshit like that, and basically murdered him. And I suspect, and actually it's not a suspicion, because actually in many cases, almost all the mass shootings that we've had here in the United States have involved psychiatric drugs being administered to the mass shooter, which tells you a hell of a lot about the psychiatric profession. It's garbage. It is pure garbage. It's not a scientific profession. They make it look like a scientific profession, and they emboss it in heavy-duty words and codes, and like, you know, medical codes, like, you know, you would have what a doctor would say. You know, you have diabetes or blood sugar, they'll have a diagnostic code, but it's all subjective. It's actually upon the observation and the personal opinion of the one doing a diagnosis versus, you know, actual physical, chemical, empirical, scientific evidence, which, you know, might be more useful than anything else. But, you know, the point is, the psychiatrists should be held responsible for all these shootings. And the law should get behind, you know, people should try to change this law. Whereas if there is a mass shooting in or any time in the past or in the future, they should be investigated as to the link between the medicines that were given these people and the responsibility of those people who gave them the medicines. And if there's a link, then it's almost like you took a car and you told a person, you know, to drink a freaking bottle of booze or vodka, and you told them to get in the car and drive down the highway, and they had an accident. That's the type of responsibility that should be on the shoulders of these psychiatrists. They should not be given carte blanche, and they should not be hiding behind pseudoscience, because I call that pseudoscience because they really don't use science to diagnose anything. They should be held responsible, actually, for most of these mass shootings that we've had in the United States. And, you know, I think they're criminals. I think they're criminals. And, you know, it's an angle that nobody's really looking at too much. And it should be looked at. Because, you know, if we can actually get the law behind this, if there's one drug out there that should be really enforced against, it should be the psychiatric medicines. Because they have been shown to be extremely harmful over the years, and yet they still give them. Two examples I gave was, well, I think they're the same thing. I think it's a brand name or something, Haldol and Thorazine. But they still administer that stuff today. And it's basically designed to basically turn somebody into like a zombie. But it could be an uncontrolled zombie. They could actually be one way, it can go one way or the other. And they used to use this on this, like I'm repeating myself, but they used to use this on the Soviet dissidents. And the reason they did that was to make you know, basically use it as a form of torture against them. That's really what it was. And that's, you know, they're doing that too with the people that are coming back from, you know, have post-stress, you know, trauma disorder or whatever you call it. And they're giving them these type of drugs too. There's all kinds of crap they're giving these people that are actually causing them to commit these crimes. And, you know, although I cannot prove it, I would actually like to see that investigated, because what would happen there is that if you could prove this, it is just like giving somebody a bottle of vodka and saying, here's your prescription, now go drive down the street. What would the cop do if a psychiatrist told somebody you had to drink a bottle of vodka before you drive on a highway? The law should be enforced against these psychiatrists, and it should go back and re-examine all these mass shootings and get the link between the drugs that these people were given and the guy that was out there that was administering these drugs under the guise of psychiatry, and put an end to this kind of garbage, because it's going to continue. It's going to continue. I think this is actually most of the root problem of these mass shootings.